Hey guys, it's JohnRibs here, coming at you with another Spire chat. Today I want to talk about the Silent Uncommon Escape Plan, which draws one card, and if the card is a skill, you gain 3 block. And a lot of the stuff that I'm saying is going to apply to a lot of cards in Slay the Spire. There are quite a lot of gray cards, colorless cards, like Flash of Steel draws a card and deals a bit of damage. What's that other one called? Finesse gains 2 block and draws a card. And there are a few other cards which are sort of comparable. But let's just talk about Escape Plan, because this is the one that you're going to, be offered early on Silent and have to decide whether to pick or not, and how highly are we picking it if we're picking it, and stuff like that. And I wanted to explain what's going into my decision making. I think that a very easy trap to fall into in this game is to think about your deck separately from thinking about the challenges that it faces. So you think about your deck and you think about, how many cards can I get myself to draw? Can I get it so I can kill things on turn 1? Can I get it so I can make 999 block or whatever, so on and so forth. And, sometimes those things aren't actually very good things to do because of the enemies that you have to fight. Or sometimes they're unnecessary things to do because doing less than that would already win you all the runs and be easier to achieve. So on and so forth. Escape Plan, I think, is a quintessential example of a card which might at first glance look like it can do nothing wrong for your deck, but then when you think about what the enemies are, you start to realize, maybe that isn't actually the case. So, yeah, Escape Plan costs you 0 energy, right? And draws you a card. And if the card's a skill, you gain 3 block. So basically the idea is sometimes this card gives you 3 block, and the rest of the time it's okay because it just drew the next card anyway. And there's actually a problem with that immediately. Believe it or not, even if you're just thinking about your own deck, imagine a situation where you have Tools of the Trade in play. Just to demonstrate. At the start of your turn, you draw an extra card, and you have to choose from the 6 cards you've drawn probably which card you're discarding. If you have Escape Plan in your hand, you have less information about what your hand is capable of doing this turn. You don't get to see the next card that it will draw, so that's question marks for you. And if you could see the next card you were going to draw, that extra information may be more valuable than the chance to get a little bit of block off of Escape Plan. So for example, if you have an enemy who's on 20 health and you draw a hand with 19 damage in it and an Escape Plan, you don't know whether the next card's an attack or not. If you didn't have Escape Plan in your deck, you see the next card, you see, oh, it's an attack. So you discard one of your blocks and deal the 20 damage. Boom, he's dead. Or you see, oh, it isn't an attack, so I can't kill him this turn, so you discard one of your attacks and get all your block played instead and kill him the next turn. And in both of those situations you're great, but in the situation where you get Escape Plan, you're not sure what to do. You may end up discarding a card that you needed to play because the card that you drew off Escape Plan, wasn't enough to kill him with all of your attacks. Or maybe it was enough to kill him with all of your attacks, but you mistakenly discarded an attack beforehand because Escape Plan was hiding that information from you. So, the same thing is true if you draw it off acrobatics. And there are some other ways can sort of, in general, it can just sort of make playing your deck a little bit iffy to have a card like Escape Plan in your deck. Another example would be if you're trying to go infinite and you need to get all of your cards into your hand and control what goes into your discard pile and stuff, but you're only allowed 10 cards in your hand, and so Escape Plan is gumming things up. Sure, that one works as well, but anyway, Escape Plan's not necessarily positive to have in your deck, just abstractly. But when you start thinking about the actual enemies in the game, you start to see there are real problems with Escape Plan. The toughest elite in Act 1, in my experience, is Gremlin Knob. and Gremlin Knob gains 2 strength every time that you play a skill after the first turn. So if you put an escape plan in your deck in Act 1 and then walk into a Gremlin Knob, this escape plan is likely actively bad for you. It's likely hurting you. And this isn't like just one throwaway hallway fight where it's hurting you. This is the toughest elite for Act 1. You've put a card in your deck which is bad against him. So, is that really something you want to do? Something you might want to think about. When you get to the end of Act 1, you're going to kill the Act boss, and you're going to be offered relics. And I think most people understand and would agree that energy relics are very powerful. Bosses are the only places that you can get relics which consistently give you 1 more energy every turn. And they all have drawbacks. And there are some very powerful relics which interact very poorly with Escape Plan. Jinxed Velvet Choker only lets you play 6 cards every turn. So if you get a Velvet Choker at the end of Act 1, having a card like Escape Plan in your deck can be very cumbersome. It can prevent you from playing cards that you really care about because you have to play this Escape Plan for a very negligible effect in order to draw the cards that you want to actually play. Another relic that can be really difficult for Silent to use is Snecko Eye. I talked about Snecko Eye in depth in an earlier chat, so I'm not going to go super into it, but basically it's very strong on Ironclad, and it's like not very easy to make it work on Silent. But it would be really nice often if you had a deck where Snecko Eye was a pickable relic at the end of Act 1, or at the end of Act 2 sometimes. What Snecko Eye does do very well is draw you extra cards, and depending on exactly what your deck is doing, that could be really nice for you. If you have a deck that's based around like Poison and Catalyst, then drawing extra cards to try to find your combo pieces to play and burst something down with Poison might be all you really care about, for example. Escape Plan is obviously atrocious with Snecko Eye. I mean, any 0-cost card pretty much is pretty bad with Snecko Eye, but Escape Plan is a 0-cost card which does very, very, very little, so it's especially bad with Snecko Eye. So you've gotten through the act fight, and then you show up in Act 2, and not only are you fighting against enemies who frail you, so you're getting even less than the 3 block that you were expecting from Escape Plan, but you're also going to be fighting against Snecko, who confuses you, and then you draw Escape Plan instead of costing 0, it costs somewhere between 0 and 3. Could be pretty big problems. And you're going to be fighting against the Chosen, and the Chosen is a terrifying hallway fight in Act 2. In fact, my numbers have Chosen plus Bird Cultist, I believe, as the worst hallway fight for Silent. Let me make 100% sure that I'm not crazy. Cultist and Chosen. It's actually slightly better for me on average than Slaver and Parasite is. Slaver and Parasite is another Act 2 fight, apparently. I'm just looking at this now. But yeah, Cultist and Chosen usually deals me 10.5 damage on average. So that's pretty bad. And that is the second worst hallway fight in the game for me on Silent. And in that fight, and in all of the other fights which have Chosen in them, the Chosen casts a Hex on you, and the Hex makes it so whenever you play a skill, you add a Dazed to your draw pile. Not to your discard pile, to your draw pile. And so Escape Plan, if played in, like, you know, the second and third turns, is contributing to you having just a huge number of Dazes in your draw pile, which you're going to have to burn through on turns 4 and 5, while you're potentially vulnerable facing attacks for up to 40 damage from this enemy, is a really nasty time, and not something that you want to deal with in particular. And then later on, and I think this is actually the thing that most people recognize first of all, but it's actually the least relevant in my opinion, but later on you may fight the Time Eater, and against the Time Eater it may be disadvantageous to have such a low impact card, because the Time Eater only lets you play 12 cards before he buffs himself and ends your turn for you. So, yeah, it may be bad against Time Eater, but I actually think, like, I don't think that that's that big a deal for Silent, honestly. I think that the really big deals are Gremlin Knob and the Chosen hallway fight, and I would say that Velvet Choker, Snecko Eye, and the Snecko fight are all things you may want to consider as well. So, all of this goes into me just not thinking that Escape Plan is a super strong card. And it doesn't really do that much for me anyway. Like, even if I take it and am excited to play it, it's a pretty low impact card, right? It is the 29th highest priority card for me on Silent. So that means that I prioritize it slightly higher than average for an average card. But it's definitely not a card that I'm taking super, super often, and most of the time that I take it, I'm already like halfway into Act 2 or all the way into Act 3, having seen that I'm not fighting Time Eater. Those are the times when I'm more interested in taking it. It's a card that does tend to get better as the game goes on. One, because you don't have to worry about Gremlin Knob or Chosen hallway fights and stuff like that yet, or anymore rather. And two, because later on in the game you may have copies of Footwork, you may have copies of Afterimage. There are powers which make Escape Plan considerably more impactful when played. You're unlikely to have those in place early in the game though, and so it's much less relevant super early in the game. So yeah, that's my chat about Escape Plan. I hope you enjoyed listening, and how much the things that I've just said apply to other cards like the colorless cards Finesse or Flash of Steel. Obviously Flash of Steel is an attack, so there's no problem with this against Gremlin Knob or the Chosen fight, but it still is a 0-cost card against Snecko or with Snecko Eye, or if you want to get Velvet Choker, it can be bad. Yeah, how much these things apply to cards like those or Deep Breath is, you know, I have my own opinions, but I'm not going to get all the way into them in this video. It's something that I think you should think about, though, definitely, as you're evaluating those other cards. And yeah, make sure that the cards you put into your deck are good against the enemies you're going to be fighting. And especially make sure that they're good against the toughest enemies that you're going to be fighting, the ones who are likely to end your run if you don't have a good deck against them. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I've been Joe on Ribs. I have links to my Discord and my Twitch channel and stuff like that below the video if you're interested at all. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Spire Side chat. Thanks for tuning in.